Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 18:30. We're gonna get going. Welcome to the fourth webinar. Just to give you a bit of context, this started as just a few friends wanted to connect and share a few rugby ideas, and then it grew till where we are now, where we can bring in speakers and they can present. So yeah, it was just an idea to stay active and stimulated during this. But I mean active in coaching and education, and then also to stimulate us. So just a few general rules. What I've picked up while attending a few webinars myself during this times is it's better to switch off your camera and then to mute your mic. You might save a few data as well, and we don't have that background noise. And then if you want to post comments, you're welcome to post there's a meeting chat. You can ask questions there. Now, once Yusuf is done presenting, we'll head into questions, and I'll read out the questions just to give it a bit of structure. So the idea is that Yusuf is going to present up until about 40 minutes, and then the last 20 to 30 minutes we're gonna allow for questions. But you're welcome to ask questions during the chat, and I'll monitor it, and then I'll post it to Yusuf once he's done presenting. Okay, so tonight it's got a rugby focus, and the topic is the trends in strength and conditioning and how you apply it in an amateur, either school or club setting. So Yusuf Vahed. Yusuf is the current head of sports science at the Blue Bulls Rugby Union. That's the only downside about him. Otherwise, he's a great guy. So just a bit of context. Yusuf is originally Yusuf is originally from the Eastern Cape. Then he studied at Stellenbosch University at the sports science department, where he did undergrad sports science and psychology. Later went on to do a honors in high performance, and then he was also my first master's student, which he completed in 2014, and he's currently enrolled for a PhD at the department. So I'm just going to give you a bit of history on Yusuf. So 2010, I met Yusuf for the first time. He walked into my office, the skinny guy, and he told me he wants to be involved in rugby, but he never touched a rugby ball in his life. So I invited him. On that stage, I was coaching one of the residence teams, and I was also new in Stellenbosch. And I took a chance on this guy, and he joined. And he said he wanted to specialize in SAQ, and I said, okay, no problem. Come, I'll pull you into my management team. And he presents the session. He can tell you the story later on what I told him after his first session. So a bit of context on Yusuf there, a bit of background. You later went on to be the head of strength and conditioning for the Cheetahs, overseeing the junior systems, and then later on you moved on to the Bulls, where you oversee also the junior system, and currently he's enrolled as the head sports scientist that oversees all the GPS monitoring and connects all the different departments together. So Yusuf, thanks for your time. Thanks for giving us the platform where you can share your knowledge, and hopefully after this our coaches will be well equipped.
Okay, Wilbur, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, thanks very much for the introduction. Remember a few more quirkier moments with you when we first started off, but firstly, just thank you for the platform. It's a real good opportunity to be able to just share knowledge and express myself on this place. Really looking forward to what some of the students will ask, also a couple of coaches. The big thing for me, no situation is perfect, and everybody has their challenges, regardless of sport, background, and it really depends on communicating with other people, learning different methods and ways of doing things, and that sort of opens up your creativity. So just to get in the mix here with the presentation. Okay. Everybody can see? We're all good. Okay, so basically the presentation I want to talk to you guys about is just in terms of strength and conditioning, accommodating a few of these trends that I'm going to speak about, how to apply it, whether you're in hockey, netball, and then from there just constantly adapting and fine-tuning and adjusting. So just on a couple of key outcomes that I really want to achieve from this, and I want to introduce you guys to just very simple and basic scientific concepts that I communicate to the coaches and that I work with on a daily basis. This is the same type of sports science and coaching language we just constantly repeat. From there, how that actually fits into a holistic approach with our training. And then from there, how you guys can apply it. So this next slide, I find just encapsulates everything Wilbur's taught me when I first started off, and something that conditioning coaches remind me about all the time, that you can actually get caught up in so much detail, whether it's on skill development, whether it's training tactics. For me, with a whole bunch of GPS data, I fall into the same pitfall where, at the start, I'll be telling coaches, listen, these guys are covering 5 kilometers with this amount of accelerations, this amount of high speed percentage. And I realized like these coaches were just looking at me completely blue-eyed. They didn't know what I was speaking about. So I learned quite quickly to talk their type of language. So if they like science, then I'll communicate to them quite significantly. If they really like the rugby detail, then I'll take that data and speak to them, in that rugby language. And again, from this presentation, I even thought to say, look, I could add so much data, but I don't know if it's going to give significance, and I didn't think it would. So that's why later on I kept this really simple and easy, because at the end of this, whether you're a student, coach or whatever, I actually want you guys to plug and play and be able to talk these concepts in any of your sports. So one big concept, and this diagram sort of looks at my role in general. So with a holistic approach of training, when you're planning and when you're moving forward, that whole circle is your performance plan. And my job is not only just GPS or monitoring, but it's about interacting between those departments and making sure everything fits into one another. The higher you go up in sports to professional level, and the more technical you chat to guys that are doing masters and doctorate, you'll soon realize that it's so difficult to just look at one aspect. And often you could set yourself up to fail by just looking at one aspect. A common thing with some coaches, because sometimes I consult with some high schools, is that they'll get to a session and they'll say, right, 20-minute skills, 20 minutes attack and defense, 20 minutes fitness. And the first thing I ask is, do those components flow together? Is it an effective plan? What are we going to try and get out this session? Because they just see one job. Hand over to the conditioning guy, he'll warm up. Hand up to this next skills coach. Hand over to this next guy, and it's so secluded. So my job, in essence, I'll be chatting to the conditioning coach and saying, look, physically, where are these guys at? What's their strengths and weaknesses? Okay, cool. So some guys have built up really good with strength. Some guys are really built up with speed. Okay, chatting to the technical coach, listen, these guys have got really great strength. What's their contact skills like? You're looking at guys that improved in speed. Can they sprint and pass a ball? And then chatting then to the head coach or, guys involved with the tactics. Say, look, how is the skills and the fitness influencing your role? Okay, cool. We're really struggling to sprint and pass. Pulling those puzzle pieces back. Can the guys physically do it? No, they can't. Great, we can fix that. Do they have the right technique to do it? Yes, no, they can't. Okay, we can fix that. Because if we're going to work in our separate silos, the problems and challenges you face is monumental. So the other side that I'll bring up is actually the mental side. And you'll see later on in the presentation, just asking a simple question of, do the players actually understand the skill, and do they understand where it fits in the game plan? That's one interesting aspect that many people shun behind. So starting off the next basic principle, and we're talking ground foundation, is training movements. So I find it very funny when you bring up training movements, everybody automatically thinks of gym. And they say, okay, how are you training movements of a squat, a deadlift, a bench press? But But if you look at the greater scheme of things, you can take these movement principles and actually build it up. So a squat, a deadlift, bench press from the physical department, getting those movements right is fundamental. Looking at the skills department, standing static and passing a ball, that's a movement. Tackling, rucking, those are movements in that department. And then looking at the tactics, how your defensive process works, that's how your team moves. That's how a team collectively moves. And even looking at attacking, just your attacking shape, how you occupying space on the field and attacking, that's also a very big, broad aspect of movement. So I always like to really dumb it down to the start and say, well, let's give definitions for this and see how we build it up. So a technique is basically the movement with no pressure. So if I ask you to do a bodyweight squat, standing static with a ball and passing, that's all technique. And that's fundamental. I mean, if you can't even squat properly without any weight, or if you can't even grip the ball and try pass, adding resistance to that's going to be a problem. So that's why you need to work on the technique and players understanding the movements required of that position or of that movement. Then when we get into calling it a skill is putting that under pressure. So let's say, for example, in the gym, as soon as I start putting a bunch of kilos on the bar, now we're putting that movement under pressure. Taking a skill drill where the fly-off receives the ball and has to run and pass with maybe a defender, that's also putting, the passing movement and that attacking shape, it's putting that under pressure. And you find as soon as you put things under pressure, it reveals weaknesses. And that's what we're there to do. We need to make sure we decrease those weaknesses. We start working on that so we can actually push performance. So they can operate at speed. They can make decisions quicker under pressure. And there I said that, our ultimate goal from communicating from the high performance plan is that we need to create situations and environments to lock those skills in and to lock it in. So when we're putting players under pressure, when we're running attack versus defense, making it chaotic where you have to pass the ball. If they're doing that, then you'll find that that'll push intensity. And if we can push intensity during training, then you see that. So one very interesting thing that came up with the research and chatting with some very successful teams, not only in football, in rugby league, what we find is that the teams that train faster with that skill accuracy, we find better transfer to the match. So in other words, if you're not putting your skills under pressure, you're not training quickly, then it's not going to transfer, because when you get to the game is so chaotic. There's so many decisions happening so quickly. Players aren't adapted to think and move quick enough. And that's the ultimate goal we're going to move towards. And right at the end of the presentation, I'll show you guys how I sort of plug it into a nice plan that you can use. So how do we train these movements? So it's very easy to say, right, let's put skill under pressure. And there's two very nice methods we see from conditioning. And the one is resisted, which is limiting your movements. You see they're putting elastic bands maybe around a guy's waist, adding weight, adding more pressure, so adding more defenders, closing the space off. And as soon as you see that type of resistance, you're going to reveal those weaknesses. And from there, if you create that environment, you can correct and you can build. So I normally see a lot of coaches saying, okay, we're going to limit your space, we're going to add more defenders. And that seems to be a very common coaching trend. The one thing I don't see very often, and I've helped out at Affie's, which is across the road from Loftus, and this method of assistant movement, I find it to be quite effective as well. So this is actually promoting the speed movement and reducing the resistance and pressure. And it's complete opposite. You're opening space up. So example of this would be, let's say you're running your attack shape and you actually take all the defenders away. So it's only your team attacking. And you tell the players and you say, right, sprint the game plan. Just go absolutely flat out. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to a minute, sprint the game plan. And what you'll see is that now guys have to understand the game plan and have to understand where to go and what actions to do, because there's very little time to think. And even though there's no players running at them, the fact that everything has to be quick and everything has to move fast, you'll actually find that the movements are under pressure. So if you have to move a ball quickly, some guys might even not get a good grip on the ball and just pop pass. Or even some guys will hesitate because they actually don't understand or know where to move. And from a physical point of view, if we're going to do speed and players don't know where to go, you can do the most fantastic fitness work, you can do the most fantastic speed drills. But again, if they can't do the skills under pressure, if they can't do the tactics under pressure, and you don't create this resist-assist environment there, it's going to be slow. And I really hammered on this point because so many times, certainly in my career, after a game, even at some Super Rugby games, you get a couple coaches that say, players were too slow, they were sluggish, it must be a fitness problem. And meanwhile, we're just not training at speed. The players don't know what they're doing. Even think back, I'm sure in your guys' careers where the fitness coach get hammered first, and looking at this holistic approach, maybe look at the technical stuff and the tactical stuff. Do players understand? Are they motivated? From the holistic point of view, you might reveal that physically the guys can gym and go absolutely nuts, but they just don't know where to implement it. Another concept and idea which we rotate around, and I'm very happy with the coaches I work with because they're beginning to understand this language really, really well. And from sports science, I'm sure students' point of view, you'll see these words quite a bit, and you'll eventually get deep understanding of it quite hectically. And it's volume and intensity with your training drills and with your training session. So you'll see there, volume is the duration of your drill, right? So if you're going to do a drill for 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's a hell of a long time. Compared to intensity, which is the speed of the drill and maybe the number of actions you're doing. So if you're doing a short high intensity drill, 10 minutes, that's normally, you have that intensity drill in mind. And the big thing which most people fail at, and this is really from professional level, even down to schoolboy level, is trying to find the balance of both, because this affects how you build physically, how you adapt with your skills and your tactics. And I've seen some really shocking things, because if you don't get this balance right, it'll just lead to injuries and underperforming. So let's take a very good example. And this is the common one, right? So we're going to train 2 hours every day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're going to train for 2 hours and just do everything, right? Now, even as a sedentary person or somebody that doesn't play rugby, to do anything for 2 hours, you won't be able to do it flat out. And immediately the skills you want to lock in, the tactics you lock in, it's not going to be valid. It won't be able to lock in effectively. And now you go through day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. By the time you get to the game, not only are players really tired, but there's no intensity to lock it in. So then you underperform. On the flip side, if you just do short high intensity burst sessions and you keep it really, really short, fine, you might be able to lock in specific movements and your drills might be able to be great and they understand the tactics. When you get to the match, you're going to have a fantastic first half. You're going to have an unbelievable first half, but then you won't have the legs and endurance to consistently perform that into the second half. And as soon as fatigue kicks in, then your decision making goes down and your speed and everything drops. So normally when I ask coaches and I see their template and their layout, you just ask a simple question. Listen, what's your goal or aim of this? If they say no, they want to go flat out with this drill, does it make sense to do it for 40 minutes? And that's where you can suggest, if you're looking for actions or intensity, maybe shift the drill towards this. If coaches want to do, if they just want to get repetitions with work and they're not worried about doing it at speed, then you can say, look, it's volume orientated. And a couple of tricks and keys and so on I've found, especially for younger athletes, when you're doing detailed sessions. So all of this is to build towards match intensity and speed. But if you're trying to get understanding and you're trying to get repetitions with your work, you always start with volume. Because if the guys don't understand, if they don't understand what they're doing and they don't have the technique, putting intensity to it too soon, the player's just going to bomb out. And, if they have to pass the ball 10 times and do it badly 9 times, then it's just not an effective drill. So starting off with basic repetition, low intensity, and building it up and making sure once you have it in a pressured environment and it's locked in, then you can start really pushing intensity. So you'll see there a question that I get asked a lot: how do I train and match intensity, or how do I meet the match demands? People think, let's just smash them, and then I'll ask, well, what do you want to smash? Then they can't give me a clear answer on that. So normally with the skills and the tactics, lock in those movements. Make sure they do it in a good pressured environment, and then from there you can start building the intensity. So then you can do resisted or assisted stuff to throttle that intensity and progress the volume. Another thing I find interesting from, and the skills coaches will laugh at this, but from pre-season, there might be some variations to skills, and the drills just there's no progression in terms of time or change.
Yusuf,
from conditioning, we're physiologically just trying to challenge the guys each week in sets of exercises.
Yusuf, can you just take it back 1 minute? We lost you there for a bit.
Okay, no problem. It's probably the Cape Town Wi-Fi. That's why sometimes it's easier to speak in Pretoria with better Wi-Fi.
So just you started off by talking about pre-season. We lost you there.
Okay, so what I find interesting is that in the pre-season, a lot of the drills, they stay standardized. So the skill coaches, they keep it exactly the same, or it's the same decision-making drills, and it goes from pre-season straight through to in-season, all the way to the end. And the funny thing is, from a conditioning point of view, physiologically, we're challenging guys sets and reps week in, week out. We're adjusting exercises on those movements, and I encourage guys to talk to the coaches, and even coaches to make progressions, resisted and assisted, pushing the intensity and slowly increasing the volume, so you also can get better results from your skill work. And pushing that skill work assists with the tactical stuff. And again, if you're training flat out and your speed increases during training, that assists a conditioning coach in implementing, better speed drills, and all of that work really assists the physical department in making sure you meet match demands. So one big thing that stuck out with the research is a 10% increase as shown to be the most effective. So what you guys can do, I think, if you don't have GPSs, look at the duration of the drill, or look at the number of actions you executing in the session. So if you have a drill for 10 minutes and you're throttling resist assist with variables in the training drill, increase it by 10%. So the following week, increase it by 1 minute. If you're executing 10 passes or 20 passes, then you just add 1 or 2 extra passes onto that. And the following week, then just add 10%. So after 2-3 weeks, you've almost increased it by 20%. And that volume, that slow progression with the volume complemented with intensity, that's really how you start getting into a good space with meeting those match demands. So after all the talking, after all the discussions with some of the concepts, I just want to show you guys and introduce you guys to something that's become quite big in conditioning and just in sports science and coaching. And you'll see this very prominent in football. And they call it weekly tactical periodization. So I find a big thing is planning. Where you're going with some of your drills and sessions. What's the plan moving forward? When are we going to do what? Why are we going to do it? And that question is very difficult if your silos are all separate. But if you start combining things together, you can actually come up with a simple plan like this. So this is just a basic example. This is actually something I suggested to one of the high schools because they actually didn't know where to start. So if you see there, I tag certain days. So on a Monday, I'll tell the coaches, right, let's have it a volume day. Let's have it a learning day. So at the bottom there, you'll see sometimes I like to give specific names. So we'll call this like an install day. So what you're doing is you're working on the technique or the basic movements of what you want in terms of skill and tactics, and take all the time you want. This is a volume day, so you can do a lot of it. Get the repetitions and, expand your drills out. You don't have to have that much pressure or decision making, but it's just about installing and understanding what we're going to do. And then you'll see at the bottom, from a conditioning point of view, complement that, I like to do longer running. So some people call it high speed running, where it's 100 meters, 200 meters, or 1 minute. So it's just long distance running. Then following the next day, what I tell the coaches, right, we've installed all the skills and the tactics. Players, they should have an understanding of how it works. Now the next day, let's put it under pressure. Let's put intensity to it. And there you see at the bottom, execute with speed. And then you'll start seeing, right, now how much did the guys learn? How much can they do under pressure? And you'll see at the bottom, that's a very good day to do your short, high intensity bursts. So if you see, it's a very nice balance between slow pace learning with a lot of volume. The next day, the volume drops and push intensity. And then from there, normally, Wednesdays is always a good recovery day. And then if you've got an opportunity for a second block, then you can repeat it again, where there's a volume block where you're learning, understanding, really taking time to install it, make sure everybody's on the same page. And the following day, add intensity to lock in those specific movements. Sometimes I think with periodization, the time is always a challenge because you'll never have enough time. I know some coaches may even have only 2 days. So there you might also want to tag it and say, right, day one is a volume day. We need to do all our learning and understanding and repetitions and long fitness. And then the following day, let's put it under pressure. There's a lot of creative ways and methods. And I'll give you guys my email at the end. And if there's any hectic, hardcore situations you guys struggle with, it'll be awesome to work together to find solutions. So in the last bit, I want to give you guys an idea of how we sort of plan out a match week and how every component fits into the ultimate goal of playing really well on a match day. Because again, a lot of people don't understand how these components fit in, where to do what, why to do certain things. And if you're a coach that's confused with your planning, I mean, imagine what the players feel that actually have to execute this stuff. I'm quite like a barman of the team, as they say fitness coaches are. And a lot of times, if sessions are too confusing and they're not clear cut and they don't understand, we're not going to get intensity, we're not going to get buy-in, and that all drops your match performance. So you'll see this is also a suggestion I gave to one of the school teams that incorporated this and just plugged and played and really started performing really well. So on a Monday, again, it's a volume day, install. So you can work on your tactics on a base level. You can work on your technique. And the principle of that is saying, gentlemen, this is what we're going to do for the weekend. We're getting understanding of it now. This is why we're doing it. Start it off early in the week. If I had a chat with Coach Wilbur as well, if you want to start introducing stuff, because it's Monday, because it's volume, because it's low key, you can really reiterate and repeat whatever new tactic or skill or whatever you want. Then on to the next day, we can start putting that under pressure. So at the bottom, the key word I like to use there is fast. So everything we did on Monday must be faster. So whether it be passing a ball, going to ground, rucking, moving around opponents, every single movement must be faster. And from a coach's point of view, I think that's one of the tougher, frustrating days because there'll be a lot of errors and correcting and a lot of feedback. but you need to correct that to put it under pressure. And if you do it really well, you'll naturally see the speed and the intensity of the session build up. And that's even without doing hectic speed drills. So one nice thing that's really good to consider on this Tuesday session is small-sided games. So instead of doing 15 versus 15, which is obviously rugby numbers, you can do 6 versus 6 or 8 versus 8 in a small confined space. And what you'll see there is that there's more actions between the players. So if you have 15 players lined up to move the ball across the field, you know, a lot of guys are going to be standing still. Whereas if you have 6v6 or 8v8, players will be passing the ball a lot more. There'll be more opportunities to execute the skill, to make decisions. You know, from the coaching point of view, if you want to play, you know, maybe a faster attacking game, then you can create rules and scenarios in those games to repeatedly get those showing up, so that you can put it to speed. You can get it constantly happening. I know a nice thing to do even as well is that if we say we're going to put intensity to a small-sided game, let's make them work for 6 minutes. And then after that, we want to highlight maybe speed passing. So we'll do small-sided games, and then straight after that into speed passing. And the coaches will say, right, I want intensity. We're only going to do it for 2 minutes, and then take water and then repeat the whole thing again. So again, it's very nice to say, I want to put it under pressure with speed. So I'm not pushing volume, constantly pushing intensity there. And then looking at the plan, a nice thing then to do to build the picture up for intensity is looking at that Thursday session and saying, all right, on this Thursday slot, we've installed what we wanted. We've done faster actions, faster movements. Physically, the guys have executed all these movements quite quickly. Let's put it in a game plan. And you'll actually see when this game plan happens, you can go 15 versus 15 or full numbers in a game. And if there's good understanding, if guys are doing it under pressure, if they're doing the skills under pressure and they've done it effectively, you'll start seeing those moments happening a lot quicker in the game. So all of a sudden they might go to ground quickly and that ball's passed out. Guys are accelerating and passing before contact. You know, if you're highlighting that on the Tuesday, that's happening a lot quicker on that Thursday session in a full game plan scenario. And from the fitness point of view, you know, you can drive the coaches to push detail and push intensity. Because if that Thursday session 15 versus 15 is happening quickly, you know, you're getting very functional and very good fitness results from that. And then just manage the volume and intensity. So if you're getting good stuff and you're pushing intensity, don't all of a sudden say, right, we're going to do this for an hour and a half, you know, because then the intensity might drop. And it's just about understanding that balance of how you progress. One nice thing and trick I like to do now with the captain's run, you know, we'd naturally build all the speed up and decision making and we'd be really happy. And then the day before the match, all of a sudden the coaches will either say, let's train for an hour, or they'll say, right, let's just walk the tactics. So there's no intensity. Now, you know, you've built towards speed. You need to finish things off quick before the match, because the match happens quickly. So I find with that captain's run, we do a little bit more assisted work where we say, right, gentlemen, no defense. You players run the attack and sprint it. Or we'll break down small situations and say, right, let's practice the defense and just repeat the scenario, maybe off a ruck really quick. And it'll be 5-10 minutes just highlighting and reiterating what we went through during the week, but it happens at pace. And then naturally, you know, everything plugs and plays to a match performance. And then, you know, the week will repeat again. I think the big thing from this is understanding exactly what you want, understanding these components, you know, because sometimes if you go on the install day on the Monday and say, for example, the players still don't understand the detail, you know, then you're going to have to adjust the Tuesday session, because if they don't understand detail and you put intensity to it, we're not going to get good skill results, you know. So it's also about throttling it and being very creative with these components. And that's a big thing with my job. And I think I'm in a very privileged position where I have coaches, you know, if they go over time, even before I say anything, they say, oh, the volume was too much. Or if they get excited with the intensity, they say, oh, I'm happy with that drill. I got the intensity I wanted, because they understand the bigger picture. So, okay, guys, that's a presentation in a nutshell. I hope everybody's still awake and kicking. You'll see I just put my email at the bottom there. By all means, guys, I really like to share. I really like intricate questions. If you're in very interesting situations with an amateur club or a school team, and you're just needing something maybe a little bit different, or you're lacking a bit of creativity to think of something new, you know, pop me an email. Try my best to help with what's worked with us before. Also popped my Instagram page up there because I think I need to be a little bit more social on social media. So by all means, follow me. And yeah, thanks very much, Tom. Thank you very much for the time to listen, and I'm looking forward to some of you guys' questions.
Okay, Yusuf, thanks for that. So one of your former classmates just sent me a WhatsApp. He's on the, and it's not Daniel, so I'm not going to expose the guy. Yeah. He asked me, what did I tell you after your first session? and I can't really recall.
Wilbur, put your camera on so I can look at you straight. I know for a fact that involves a lot of swearing, so I can't really repeat that. But I do tell you, I think, yeah, you tune me about my skinniness and my lack of rugby knowledge, but you like my swearing and you like my passion. I can tell you that.
Okay. No, so I've got a question. And I'm going to ask. John asked the question, but I'm going to start with Chris's question because that's going to answer some of John's concerns as well. Chris asked about do you incorporate technical periodization, and then later on he indicated that you did answer part of it, and then he responded, do you look at resisted and assisted training as position specific, so you cater physiologically for your front five, for example? So that's the one part. And then John asked, can you give examples of some resisted training activities for that's going to prepare players for the breakdown?
Okay, so we're at a very good position where we do have a bit of time with the gym work. So after gym, we normally have an integrated skills block where we spend about 15 minutes. And there, it's a lot easier to work with resisted and assisted movements one-on-one with players. So there we'll maybe get elastic bands and even just wrapping around one guy's arm and resisting the movement in a pass. What's quite nice with the breakdown, for example, upstairs, obviously we move all guys in just open space. We'll maybe give a medicine ball and elastic band around a guy's waist, and we'll maybe have 2 bags and get a guy to drive through the 2 bags, you know, with his hips resisted, quickly go to ground with the medicine ball and recoil that. So again, that's really resisted in terms of just the ball being heavier, being held back with driving and putting more pressure because you've got 2 opponents now instead of 1. The assisted movement would obviously be just getting a build up with that speed and maybe getting them to move slightly off angles and accelerate into that. And then obviously a lighter ball, getting the recoil a lot quicker on the ground. So our coaches are very good with feedback and one-on-ones to build guys up. So when we get to some of the skill drills on field, we can progress it a lot quicker. I think as well, adding on to that, the one thing I find is that when you're starting off with some amateur players, adding volume and spending a little bit more time on volume is sometimes a lot more helpful before you push intensity. Once guys are in that environment enough and you create resisted assisted work in progress, later on when you get to first team, when you get to professional level, you can push intensity like a lot quicker because guys understand the environments, the decision making, and then you just fine tune it from there.
So there's just to follow up. I think Chris was also referring to, do you do positional specific training?
We highlight specific skills that's very important for our game plan. So we don't necessarily work a lot on offloading, but we'll work on, really fast bullet passes. Obviously a double heads tackling, recoiling quickly, breakdown work. So from the tactics point of view, those are our building blocks we'll work towards. Then from there, we'll start categorizing guys to say, look, these guys are struggling with these movements, so that's their individual work-ons. These are each guy's individual work-ons. With more critical things like scrumming and lineouts, those coaches will look at specific movements there, and normally in their warm-ups with their drills, they'll fine-tune that. A very nice thing as well the coaches started is individual development blocks. So once we have our full session, so we'll do fitness, we'll do skills, we'll do tactics. At the end, we tell the players, you have 10 minutes. We've communicated what your work-ons need to be. So here's a 10-minute block to work on it. And the coaches will just overview a lot of this stuff. So now you give players the responsibility to improve their individual work, and you can really correct it. It's that balance of them taking responsibility, not necessarily you feeding them so much, recording that and getting the players to come back with the footage so you can correct that even more. But I think, again, with a position and individual approach, you look at it from the top down. What is your game plan like? What are the small components that you need to put under pressure? And then, build those building blocks up, put them under volume, put that under pressure and resist assist, and then see how that affects your general sessions.
Thanks for that, Yusuf. Then I've got a couple of questions. There's 4 parts to this question. I'm going to start with the second one because I think that's going to branch out to you to answer to the first question as well. How much of this philosophy will you see in practice? And linked to that is how does a typical session look at the Bulls? It's not really specific to what part of the season they're referring to. So that's the 2 parts. So how does this philosophy of the technical prioritization fit into practice, and how do you see it in practice? And just explain a typical structure of a session.
Okay, so weekly tactical periodization is the be-all and end-all of our planning. A few years ago, a couple coaches pushed it in and they explained the philosophy and principles. Because a while ago, everybody was just doing their own work in their own silos. And then all of a sudden in a game, that energy or that ability to read situations where there's a turnover, and now you have to have that energy to all of a sudden from attack to defend, that gets quite challenging. And then you realize that everything, you need to try cover everything you can during training, but such limited time. So that's why we normally tag it, your install day, learning principles, learning concepts. Then we go up and we say, faster day. So again, whatever we did on the Monday, we have to do it quicker. And then the other day, we look at it as more as intensity approach of just executing game plan flat out, executing all those skills. So from a top-down point of view, we'll adjust those variables for the week, and that's also part of my job to make sure that we're managing those loads. So some days we might train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Some days, depending if we play a Friday game or Saturday game, we might say, right, Monday, we're just going to install what we need to do, and we need to fix a few problems. Okay, because we're deloading, now we're going to have a different style faster day on the Tuesday. And we are going to adjust different drills to execute more speed. Again, I'm very privileged that we have all the GPSs, so I can look exactly at what type of speed, what type of distance we're covering out of a lot of this stuff. So I'll chat with the fitness coach a lot. I'll chat with the attack and defense coach a lot, and we'll sort of plug and play and put a plan together that fits every component. Looking at preseason, you want to try to get resilient from a physical point of view and from your skills and tactics. So that's preseason is actually more of a challenge because you're trying to get as much fitness as you can in, trying to get some really decent strengths work that complements your skill work. I laugh because I read one article to say, a lot of your skills need to be done preseason. And I agree and disagree with that. You know, your skills is the movements in the gym. It needs to be done all the time. So that base and foundation, you need to be grinding on that from the get-go. But I think the big thing from preseason is tactically the understanding of where you're going, so that when you get to in season, you're spending little time on that volume and that install, and more time just high pressure environments, quick decision making, putting skills under pressure. So you'll see as well, if you do a lot of research, the football guys also believe in this. And certainly something when I consult and I move forward, weekly tactical periodization is something I drive really, really hard.
Okay. Thanks, Yusuf. So there's these two questions are also linked. So one part of the question is, how do you make coaches better? And then also linked to that question is, how do you get buy-in from the coaching staff?
So, you know, you can expand this question out to even the players. So, I mean, the coaches you work with, they understand what they want to do. So they understand their tactics, you know, they understand their game plan. And you have to sort of learn their personality and how to work with these guys. Because, you know, if you go in hard with a coach and say, coach, this is how we're going to plan and this is how we're going to map it, you know, they can easily resist that and disagree completely. So you have to understand, and I use certain terms and languages to tell coaches, look, you know, what is important for you? Okay, so these skills, these tactics. Okay, coach. So our end goal is to make sure we operate at 110% on match day. That is our ultimate goal. Coach, I want to make sure our players are so ready on match day that we just blow everybody out the water. So, you know, from there, I try and explain some of these principles to the coaches to say, look, this is the idea behind the Thursday session. If we go 15 versus 15, what do you feel is important? What detail do you need out of that? You know, what's your goal out of this session? Normally you get coaches to buy in quite quickly because, you know, they're very unfamiliar with planning and structuring. So as soon as you start implementing what they find really, really effective. So with the skills coaches, they're the coolest guys in the world, because you can say, look, this is what I'm doing in the gym. What movements do you need with your passing? Okay, so you're struggling with this guy's hip hinge on maybe getting low in the breakdown. Okay, cool. Well, come look at my gym sessions. See the movements you like from there. And you go to the skills sessions and you see, coach, I'm seeing those similar things in my gym. And you start talking the movement language with the skills. You know, then you can even get buy-in with that skills coach to incorporate it with the tactics. Or normally with attack and defense sessions, I'll normally put the GPS data out and I'll sit with the coaches and say, look, coach, you know, what was your goal with this drill? And sometimes if it's a backline drill, they'll say, look, I was looking for speed. And you say, well, coach, this is the accelerations we got, and this is the high speed we got. So this is actually what you got out of it. And it helps to understand the drills. So I stand there on the side of the field and I take notes, and I really jot down a lot of things and say, look, coach, you didn't get enough accelerations and you actually wanted those short bursts. So maybe get them to stand 5 meters back in that drill and accelerate onto the ball. You know, let's see if that has an effect. Or, you know, you ask the coach and say, listen, coach, I actually don't understand your drill. I mean, I'm by far not the most technically savvy in terms of rugby. So I always go to the coaches, listen, teach me. You know, teach me what's important for you. Can I look at your drills? Can I ask what you're trying to get out of it? And then slowly start incorporating my language into it.
Okay, thanks. Yusuf, this is more a pre-up question. This is from Hanu, and you know Hanu well. So he's giving you a case study. So he's got 5 boys with shoulder injuries. What is the go-to with regards to shoulder prehab?
Shoulder prehab. From the conditioning point of view, look, working with the physios, you want to make sure from the physio point of view, the movements you have don't have any pain. Right. So if we can even expand on where we're from, when you have an injury, the movement patterns are broken. You know, some guy's got all of a sudden a contusion on the shoulder and he's had an op. Now, I mean, even a basic pass movement, that that movement skill is out. So, you know, what I'd first do is make sure he's pain free. And I'd actually even I'd chat to my skills coach and say, look, what is the basic skill drill we can do for handling? So even if it's just holding a ball, and I even actually think my skills coach is on you at the moment, even just handling a ball, getting the grip and just rotating the ball forward straight in front of you. From the gym point of view, you know, we're going to start building up those specific muscles so that we can handle speed and we can handle load. I find it really well that when you start including the skills coach as soon as you can, that makes such a big difference in terms of returning to play. So if you can put the technique in passing and really break it down to like the most basic form of even just holding the ball and rotating and then just passing the ball forward, getting the grip with one hand, you know, progressing with two hands, sitting on your knees across the body. By the time their shoulder's fully repaired and they've done sufficient gym work, physios, bios clear them, you can actually, you've reached a comfortable stage with their technique that you can actually put their skills under pressure right away. And if you put it under right away, you can actually start pushing intensity and getting back to your tactic sessions quite quickly.
Okay, so there's two more questions, or actually a couple more, but I want to bring Hayden as well in, if Hayden doesn't mind, because there was a question from Chris as well regarding is offloading a neglected skill in South Africa compared to, or is offloading potentially a neglected skill such as technical kicking for Northern Hemisphere teams? So I don't know, if Hayden want to respond to that question. If Hayden is fine with that. Because Hayden, for those that don't know Hayden, he's originally from Cape Town, played rugby at a high level, and then he's currently the skills coach at the Bulls as well. So Hayden, if you don't mind.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We've spent a lot of time basically focusing on the fundamentals of rugby, and especially myself working a lot with the academy players. Is just making sure that we are certainly breaking those fundamental skills down into micro movements, and as well trying to apply principles and sub-principles to the actual fundamentals. So regarding the offload, within a post-season scenario, we certainly look to break the skill down and emphasize it as a pass specifically. And as we move into pre-season and competition mode, we've certainly looked to certainly try and complex the skill. So adding three actions towards a specific skill and try and putting them in complex scenarios. And within competition phase, we're certainly trying to put that skill under pressure within the week, so that within, excuse me, so that within a match situation, we are certainly trying to control it, and we've trained that scenario throughout. If that helps, it's certainly not a neglected skill. Not from our side, and we see that certainly as part of the fundamentals of the game, if that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and thanks for that response, and thanks for joining as well. So there's a couple of more questions that I want to ask. Is I'm not sure who posted the question. It seems like it's anonymous. So how will you challenge Jake's white mindset, Yusuf?
Oh, wow. So, look, I think the first thing I'll look at is, you know, what is his template? What does he believe in? Because there's so many ways, you know, there's so many ways in terms of tactical periodization you can do this. I mean, I've seen some guys within one session do volume first half of the session and then intensity, and they run through it over 2-3 days. I've seen some guys have just like a volume week and then an intensity week. You know, a lot of guys really think out the box with this stuff. So I don't want to be too hard on my own process, because then I'm my own, bias, like that'll be my own insecurity in a way. So the first thing I do is actually look and say, what is your game plan? What are you used to doing in a week? What's your ideas behind the structuring of a week, how you want to play, what's your skills looking like in each department? And then from there say, look, this is the templates I've worked with and the success I've had. And sort of coming to a middle ground of saying, what'll be the most effective for our situation. I think then that's when you need a lot of expertise in terms of, someone like Hayden saying from the bottom down approach to say, look, if that's the skills you want to play, this is the type of guys that we have and we don't, that can execute the skills and that can't. From a physical point of view, if this is how we want to train and run, some guys are built for it, some guys aren't. And with those strengths and weaknesses, with the players we have, listening to the man on top of how he wants to run stuff, then you can actually start making constructive decisions. So if, sometimes the coach will say, look, we want to play like this. This is, some guys will be quite open-minded. How do we get to this end result? And then you can push your way a lot more. But I think someone like Jake White's got quite a few templates, got quite a few ideas. So I think it's just maybe meeting a middle ground on what's worked for me and what's worked for him. Okay,
thanks. So the guy that anonymous revealed himself. So that's Coach Warren. So Coach Warren is the current assistant coach of the USA ladies team. So I don't know why he wants to fly under the radar in the air. So you asked a question, and I think it's a very important question, and then that's gonna lead me to Daniel's question as well. That's why I want to ask this one first. Is how much in play versus out play conditioning do you do? Example, with the ball and without the ball. Let's say during a Super Rugby campaign. So let's say it's in season. To make it.
So just repeat that. So in
your ratio of ball in play and out of play conditioning. Let's say you're in competition.
Okay. So a very interesting stat to really look at is during a match, how much ball in play time is there? So I think it's around between 32, 40 minutes, and that's already a good indicator of how much time in training you need with the ball. So again, 10% approach. If the ball in play time for a match is 34 minutes, already in pre-season you need to be building up towards more than that. For a Super Rugby team, you don't meet the demands, you need to surpass it. So then you'll start training on your volume days a lot more frequent with that. The thing with in season, and again, this is where I think Warren is also a nice guy to speak to about this. Not only looking at the amount of ball in play time, but the quality of the play as well. So there's, and this is again where the departments mix. From the conditioning point of view, great. We need to be training above ball in play time, and during maybe the Tuesday, Thursday session. The small-sided games, you can actually work out to maybe 30 minutes or so, or 32 minutes of that. But it doesn't help chasing that number, and the skill set isn't complementing it. So that's where pre-season you already start building that foundation. So physically they can run for meters. In terms of skill, they can execute it, and then in season. Managing loads through the week, that's one particular number you can actually manage quite well. So if the goal is to train above match intensity, we can push that minutes in play. If it's to meet the match, you can keep it on that number. If you're just doing a volume day, then you can actually just surpass that quite a bit and just go for an hour 10 training.
Okay, thanks, Yusuf. So the second last question is one of your former classmates. So you asked, how do you measure game actions during a match to monitor training load? Do you use video GPS? And then you follow that up with, do you use that information to help develop drills or training scenarios?
Yeah, so we use GPS for every single thing we do. So even if it's a line-out unit session on an early Tuesday morning, I need to know exactly how much the guys are sprinting, how much they're walking, how much they're jumping. So I take that into consideration with the load. The one big thing I'm trying to do now is reflect everything to the game. So, you know, I want to know the speed and the intensity of a match, because the one key thing I find that resonates really well with coaches is, you know, if we're doing a small-sided game and I tell the coaches that was above match intensity, you know, then they know we're on the right path. Then what was the skill level like? Are you happy with the decision making? Yes, they're happy with that. Great, we're on a good path. Or if you say, listen, coach, we wanted 15 versus 15, it was below match intensity. Coach, problem, we need to fix it. What can we fix? Okay, skill-wise, it was too slow and they don't have understanding. Okay, that's what's stopping us from getting quick. So the research even says meters a minute. So the amount of distance players cover in a minute, that's normally the metric universally used to monitor the intensity. Then you can look at speed from 2 points of view. So the accelerations is short high intensity bursts. That's normally associated with skill. So with accelerating onto a ball, pushing up on defense, accelerating into contact. Then the high speed stuff is normally if you have space and you're just sprinting flat out. So that's the numbers I use and I reflect during the week. In terms of the number of actions, that's a little bit more from the video analysis point of view. So, you know, we've got various video analysis suites, and I think the coaches also do their own individual analysis on, you know, the number of ruck situations, tackles, passing. The one nice thing, if you've got hands, certainly with the senior team, is having an intern on the side that's counting the number of passes or the number of ruck situations, whether it's successful or not. That's also another nice way to make sure, you know, accuracy in training is really effective. But that's more the video guy side. And as I see, you're probably going to chat to a video guy next week, also one of my friends.
Sorry, I was muted there for a bit. So we've got two questions left. So one from Coach Warren again, and I'm going to end off with that one. But I want to go back to Chris's question. Mm-hmm. And he asked about, in the current climate where we're in lockdown, what do you do with your play? Any creative tools or any creative ideas that you can share with the group?
So I think the big challenge is to keep the players moving. So from a physical point of view, just doing body weight exercises, if you've got any cardio equipment, or if you're privileged enough to have a decent yard to run around, you know, getting your heart and lungs operating at this point of view, it just helps with the fitness when you come back and just managing that load. I certainly know from the skills point of view, you know, you want to try and at least keep the technical work going, and that's pretty much all you can do. Just the technique, movements, and just body weight stuff. The reality is that when we get back, you know, putting high pressure situations, players might not be comfortable with that just yet. You know, so they'll have to get their eye in. They'll have to, you know, execute the movements at speed. That will naturally take time, and it'll take time for everybody. The big thing for me is that, you know, we'll have to start off at a base level again. So you don't want to create an environment where it's too much volume and that skill development is just bombing out because guys are just too tired. You know, you still want to create a comfortable environment to get the skills up again. And certainly the guys that have been working on the technique, and if they've got watt bikes or bicycles, they'll be maybe a step ahead of the other guys. But it's going to be a challenge for all of us to try and just build up that resilience again to high pressured scenarios.
Okay, Yusuf, we're gonna end off with the last question from Coach Warren, and I think this is quite a difficult one. Who's making Yusuf better?
Who's making
you better?
Oh, who's making me better? I'd actually have to say the rugby coaches, because of the fact that, I'll go to Hayden. Hayden's probably one guy that I speak to quite a bit, and I'll say, look, what are you trying to do in this drill? I'm not a rugby guy. What's your goal out of this drill? And he's quite comfortable to explain his training template to me, and I'll say, okay, cool. I'll go to one or two of the other coaches and say, what are you trying to get out of this drill? Okay, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing accelerations here, and I've actually learned. I've learned a hell of a lot, just in terms of skill, and talking their language. Even tactical coaches, I'm not scared to say, listen, I have no idea why we did that move. Can you explain why? That's certainly from the rugby language and the coaching language. And then from the sports science and conditioning point of view, Tim Gabbett's one guy that I'm trying to chat to a lot to help my understanding of intensity and volume. Dr. Nicholas Gill, strength and conditioning with the All Blacks. I mean, his work is also, just in terms of broadening my creativity, is really up there. Another guy, Ashley Jones, I had conversations with him and I actually sent him some of my stuff. And even one of his feedback to me was, I need to constantly adapt and change after each season to keep my thinking process fresh. So Warren, I'll even throw a question to you, that, how can you get the same result but do it in a different way? How can you get the same movements and the same decision making but change the drill up? Because I think, even as a young guy, I told him, I said, I don't want to fall into the same pitfalls as other guys. And he says what tends to happen is people get comfortable with their template and people get comfortable with their drills and they just repeat it over and over and over. So that was a really good, that was something that's always stuck with me. And I always ask myself, how can I get the same effect, but in a different way?
Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. Yusuf, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us. And it's good to see also that students that comes from the Department of Sports Science that excel at a provincial level. Hayden, thanks for your input as well. Thanks for the response there to the skill-related question. And then thanks for everyone that came out and listened and made time available. And then also to the sports science students that availed themselves to attend. Then next week, as Yusuf mentioned, we have Vahed Ellis. He's the current Super Rugby performance analyst at the Lions. He'll join us for next week for the first part. He'll present, and then we'll have a Q&A. And then after that, on the 8th of May, we'll have a rugby science forum again. So just email us for more information. And again, thanks for coming out and look after yourself and stay safe. And Yusuf, thank you once again for making yourself available and sharing knowledge. And I think you were a bit skeptical on how to respond to that Blue Bulls question because Hayden is here as well, but we can chat afterwards. Okay, thanks guys.
Thanks guys. Cheers.